Welcome to OMeranger004, and today we will explore the comic book origins of Moon Knight. But before we begin, please join me on Patreon by OMeranger004. Your small donation helps run the channel. With that out of the way, let's begin. Moon Knight, Mark Spector, is a fictional character appearing in American comic books published by Marvel Comics. Created by writer Doug Monk and artist Don Perlin, the character first appeared in Werewolf by Night number 32, August 1975, 1. The son of a rabbi, Mark Spector is a former Marine and CIA operative who becomes a mercenary, despite his conflicted feelings about violence and morality. During a job in the Sudan, he is appalled by ruthless fellow mercenary Raoul Bushman. Bushman then attacks and kills archaeologist Dr. Alron. Spector saves the archaeologist's daughter and colleague Marlene Alron, then fights and is defeated by Bushman. The dying Spector is brought into a recently unearthed tomb for shelter and clothing before a statue of the Egyptian moon god Khonshu. Spector seems to die but then suddenly revives, fully healed. He claims Khonshu wants him to be the Moon's Knight, redeeming his life of violence by now protecting and avenging the innocent. It is later revealed Khonshu is real, one of several entities from the Othervoid, a dimension outside normal time and space, who were worshipped as gods by ancient Earth people. On his return to the United States, Spector invests his mercenary profits into becoming the crime fighter, Moon Knight, aided by his colleague Jean-Paul, Frenchie, Duchamp and Marlene Alron, who becomes his lover and eventual mother of his daughter. Along with his costumed alter ego, he uses 4 other identities to gain information from different social circles: billionaire businessman Stephen Grant, taxicab driver Jake Lockley, red-haired little girl inner child, and suited consultant Mr. Knight. It is later revealed Mark Spector has dissociative identity disorder, incorrectly referred to as schizophrenia in some stories, and that the alters known as Grant and Lockley originally manifested during his childhood, subsequent identities emerging during his adulthood. It is debated in different stories whether Spector's mental disorder is due to childhood trauma or the result of brain damage caused by his psychic connection to Khonshu. A connection compelling Moon Knight's personality sits between the 4 major aspects of the Moon God's multifaceted nature: the Traveler, the Pathfinder, the Embracer, and the Defender of those who travel at night. Khonshu claims he created a psychic connection with Mark Spector when the latter was a young boy, decades before he was ready to be fully recruited as his avatar on Earth, the left fist of Khonshu. In most of his stories, Moon Knight has no supernatural abilities beyond occasional visions of mystical insight. He relies on athletic ability, intelligence, advanced technology, and expert combat skills. Since becoming Moon Knight, there have been multiple occasions when Mark Spector has died only to then be resurrected by Khonshu, although how many times he may be resurrected is unknown. For a time, Moon Knight's strength and resiliency to injury could reach superhuman levels depending on the phases of the moon, but this ability later vanished. 3. The character has made appearances in various media outside of comics, including animated series and video games. Moon Knight will make his live-action debut in Moon Knight, an upcoming Disney Plus television series centered around the character, set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Oscar Isaac starring in the title role. 5. The character was ranked by Wizard magazine as the 149th greatest comic book character of all time. 6. IGN also listed Moon Knight as the 89th greatest comic book character, stating that Moon Knight is more or less the concept of what would happen if Batman were to have dissociative identity disorder. 7, and is number 49 on their list of the top 50 Avengers. 8. Originated born in Chicago, Illinois. Mark Spector is the Jewish-American son of Elias Spector, a rabbi who survived Nazi persecution. In the other world, a realm outside of normal time and space, the entity Khonshu, once worshipped as a moon god by the people of ancient Egypt, becomes interested in Mark. Khonshu and those like him cannot leave the Othervoid without great difficulty but can create psychic connections with hosts and avatars in the physical universe of Earth. Believing Mark Spector to have a weak mind that makes him vulnerable to psychic connection, Khonshu chooses the boy to one day act as his knight and avatar. After Khonshu chooses Mark, the boy discovers by chance that Rabbi Yitz Perlman, a close friend of his family, is really a Nazi named Ernst who continues to target and murder Jews. Mark fights Perlman and escapes. Perlman then disappears without a trace. 26. Soon afterward, either because of the trauma of his experience with Perlman or due to the brain damage caused by Khonshu creating a psychic connection between himself and the boy, Mark Spector begins showing signs of dissociative identity disorder. Mark believes he meets and befriends a boy named Stephen Grant, not realizing he himself is acting as Stephen at times. 25. In a vision, Mark sees Khonshu promising to one day heal the boy's mind. Khonshu, being an entity who has multiple aspects of his personality and exists out of phase with normal time and space, later claims Mark's divided personality is the result of his mind trying to echo the moon god's own multifaceted nature. 27. As a teenager, Mark exhibits another alter in addition to Steve, this one named Jake Lockwood. The appearance of this third personality leads Mark's parents to send him to live at Putnam Psychiatric Hospital. Released to attend his father's funeral, Mark escapes and joins the U.S. Marine Corps, where he becomes a formidable combatant and a trained heavyweight boxer. After Mark serves 3 years in Force Recon 28, the Marines discover he lied on his paperwork and conclude his history of mental illness makes him unfit for duty. 29. He is discharged and earns a living as an underground boxer and fighter in Baghdad until he is recruited by French pilot and mercenary Jean-Paul Frenchy Duchamp. 29. The two work together on several assignments. During this time, Spector encounters CIA operative Jason Messendale, who later becomes the costumed mercenary Jack-O-Lantern and then becomes the second villain to adopt the name Hobgoblin. 30. Mark's brother Randall Spector becomes a mercenary as well, but is driven by bloodlust. In Italy, Randall kills Mark's girlfriend Lisa. After a violent confrontation, Mark leaves Randall for dead. Randall later recovers from his injuries. 31. Eventually, Frenchy and Mark meet mercenary Raoul Bushman, who is impressed by their work and recruits them to help with certain jobs. 32. Spector considers that morally he exists in the center between Frenchy, a good man with a firm moral center, and Bushman, a ruthless, often amoral man who takes pride in his ability to kill. Spector and Frenchy accept a contract with Bushman helping the local warlord in the Sudan quell a rebellion. One of the rebels they shoot down is Mark's own brother Randall, though Mark is unaware of this and doesn't even know that Randall is in the area. Despite his bullet wounds, Randall survives, convinced Mark recognized him and deliberately tried to kill him. 33. Mark Spector is appalled at Bushman's bloodlust and that he targets civilians as well as enemy combatants. Bushman kills Dr. Peter Alron, an archaeologist whose team, which includes his daughter Marlene Alron, recently unearthed a hidden tomb. Bushman intends to loot the tomb and kill any witnesses. Spector scares off Marlene, saving her life, and then engages Bushman in combat. Defeated, Spector is injured and abandoned in the desert without food or shelter, suffering in the freezing temperature of the night. Despite this, He makes his way back to civilization before collapsing, near death. Locals carry him into the tomb and leave him before a statue of Khonshu, moon god and protector of travelers at night. Marlene realizes Mark saved her life earlier and prepares to mourn him as his heart stops. Moments later, Mark Spector revives, fully healed. He claims to have seen the moon god Khonshu and been chosen to now act as the Moon's Knight of Vengeance, the Crystal Khonshu. Marlene believes this was a dream or illusion. Mark takes a silver, hooded cloak from the statue of Khonshu, adopting it as his own. 34. Randall watches this all from nearby. As soon as Mark leaves, Randall presents himself to the same statue of Khonshu, hoping to also be blessed with power and have his wounds healed. When nothing happens, he resents Mark for winning the moon god's favor instead. 33. Werewolf by Night. Hulk. Magazine. Moon Knight Volume 1, 1975-1984, edit. After confronting and defeating Bushman, Spector returns to America with Frenchie, now joined by Marlene and determined to become a crime fighter called Moon Knight, adopting a white and silver Kevlar bodysuit coupled with Khonshu's hooded cloak. When asked why he would wear white and silver while operating at night, Moon Knight answers he is meant to be a light in the darkness and that he and Khonshu want their enemies to know he is coming. To fund his activities and gain influence in business, Spector uses his Stephen Grant identity to start a business and make some careful investments, turning his mercenary profits into a small fortune. Buying a mansion for his home base, Spector Grant then funds the creation of crime-fighting equipment and weaponry, including the Moon Copter. To help gain knowledge from street criminals and civilians, Mark becomes a taxicab driver as Jake Lockley. Lockley quickly makes friends with diner manager Jenna Landers, and her sons Ray and Rick. Ray, a pilot, later becomes an ally of Moon Knight, piloting the Moon Copter when Frenchie is unavailable. Moon Knight also befriends Bertrand Collins, a former textbook salesperson who is now homeless and operates as a street informant. 35. Learning of the criminal network known as the Committee, Moon Knight accepts an assignment from the group and pretends to agree with their agenda. Armed with silver weaponry, Moon Knight is sent to fight the werewolf Jack Russell in Los Angeles. After capturing the werewolf, Moon Knight later frees him and together they halt the Committee's plans. 36. Moon Knight then battles a variety of enemies and criminals, some on his own, some while teaming up with heroes such as Spider-Man, Daredevil. 37. Doctor Strange. 38. The X-Men, and the Fantastic Four. 39. His own brother Randall, having recovered from their last fight, embarks on a career as the Hatchet Man, an axe-wielding serial killer who targets women. Moon Knight fights the Hatchet Man, who seemingly dies during their battle. 31. Years later, Moon Knight will learn that the Hatchet Man who died was an imposter. Randall had used drugs and psychological manipulation to convince the imposter he was the real Randall Spector, even having him undergo plastic surgery so they would be identical. Having faked his death, Randall hides and plans his next move against Mark. 40. During one adventure, Spector encounters the Midnight Man, a thief named Anton Mogart who steals for the thrill and wears a black costume resembling Moon Knight's own suit. 41. During his battle with Moon Knight, Midnight Man falls into the New York River, seemingly to his death. In truth, he survives but his face is deformed by acidic sewage. Swearing vengeance, Midnight Man joins forces with Bushman and lures Moon Knight into a trap. Moon Knight survives and Midnight Man escapes again. Later, after gaining a greater sense of peace with his past and his deceased father, Mark Spector decides to largely retire his Moon Knight identity and focus on living a quieter life with Marlene at his side. Moon Knight Volume 2. Fist of Khonshu, and West Coast Avengers 1985-1989. Edit Marlene and Mark Spector set up Spector International Galleries, an art business that curates and organizes collections and exhibits. When Mark Spector has visions of Khonshu summoning him, he decides to return to Egypt and investigate. Convinced Mark is delusional and only thinks he sees visions and hears voices, Marlene leaves him. In Egypt, Spector meets priests of Khonshu who supply him with a new arsenal of moon-themed weaponry and declare he will now be a true vengeance avatar, the Fist of Khonshu. The moon god then blesses him with increased strength depending on how much moonlight shines down on Earth. 42. With his new power and weapons, Moon Knight defeats a villainous priest of Anubis, god of death. After returning to America, Moon Knight works with the newly formed West Coast Avengers, although this distances him even further from Frenchie and Marlene. 43. He time travels to 2940 BC to rescue the Avengers, where he gains replacement weapons designed by fellow Avenger Hawkeye. 44. He then officially joins the West Coast Avengers, 45, and enters a brief romantic relationship with Tifa. Moon Knight and the Avengers are later attacked by soldiers working for Khonshu's rival, Seth, who is invading Asgard. Khonshu abandons Moon Knight to battle Seth. He then explains it was his wish that Spector join the Avengers and so he influenced Moon Knight's mind to do so. Following Seth's defeat, Moon Knight resigns from the team. 46. Moon Knight also gives up the Egyptian-themed replacement weapons designed by Hawkeye. This act of independence, and his defiance to remain the Avengers simply because Khonshu wishes it, evidently causes Mark to lose his lunar-based superhuman strength as punishment. 47. Mark Spector. Moon Knight 1989-1994, edit after reuniting with Marlene and Frenchie. 48. Mark Spector sets up a new home in a mansion in Southampton, Long Island, NY, expands his business into Spector Enterprises, and resumes his activities as Moon Knight. Soon afterward, he and the Black Cat cross paths with a new thief Midnight who wears the costume of the Midnight Man. Moon Knight learns the thief is 18-year-old Jeffrey Wilde, son of Anton Mogart. Wilde reveals Mogart discovered he had contracted cancer due to the same chemicals that restricted him and spent his final days in a hospice, where Wilde tracked him down. The two bonded and learned from each other. Following Mogart's death, Wilde adopted his father's costume and performed dynamic thefts in order to impress Moon Knight, hoping to convince the hero to let him become his sidekick. At midnight, Wilde hopes to make up for his father's criminal past while finding his own purpose in life. Despite Moon Knight's protests that he doesn't need a sidekick, Midnight follows him into new adventures and is able to gain some training during adventures with the Punisher, 49, and with the mercenaries Silver Saber, Sandman, and Paladin, 50. Over time, Wilde concludes that Moon Knight's ethics and methods are too much responsibility and that he prefers to pursue excitement. He grows to resent Moon Knight, believing the hero owes him more respect and is responsible for the death of his father, since their battle indirectly led to Mogart being exposed to toxic chemicals. Mark Spector is kidnapped and brought to the country of Bosqueverd in South America. He is put on trial for his actions while acting as a mercenary during a previous regime change, including causing the death of Ricardo Dominguez, the previous president whom Spector instinctively shot in self-defense when the man reached for a gun. Marlene leads a rescue effort with Frenchie. Left alone in New York City, Jeff Wilde performs thefts using Moon Knight's costume and equipment and stumbles onto a meeting between members of the Secret Empire terrorist cult. He barely escapes. In Bosquever, Spector is found guilty but is able to bargain with the new regime and have his sentence overturned. 51. Wilde runs into Spider-Man, who realizes he's an imposter. Panicking, Wilde tries to escape only to then be hunted by the Secret Empire. He is saved by Spider-Man and the real Moon Knight. Angry that he panicked and determined to prove himself, Wilde challenges one of the Secret Empire leaders, Number B, to attack him. Number B strikes Wilde with an energy blade that burns his body instantly. The Secret Empire then takes Wilde away, leaving Moon Knight to pursue, aided by Spider-Man and the Punisher. After facing several Secret Empire agents, the heroes are told that Jeff Wilde died from his injuries and computer records confirm it. 52. In truth, the Secret Empire rebuilds Wilde as a cyborg so he can be their living weapon. Blaming Moon Knight for his injuries and abandoning him, as well as for his father's death, Wilde swears revenge. Meanwhile, Moon Knight resumes his activities, feeling guilty that he may have been able to prevent Wilde's death if he'd acted differently or had been a better influence on the boy. 53. Moon Knight encounters members of the Knights of the Moon, soldiers of a rogue faction of the cult of Khonshu. This particular cell of the Knights of the Moon are led by Plasma, a mutant terrorist they believe to be the true chosen champion of Khonshu. Plasma is determined to convince different groups and cults she is their messiah, chosen by various gods, so she can then use her new followers to achieve global domination. Together with Ghost Rider, Moon Knight defeats Plasma's soldiers. Plasma inadvertently causes her own death when she doesn't heed Moon Knight's warning. The experience shakes Moon Knight, leading him to question if he was also misguided in his belief that he followed the will of Khonshu. 54. While fighting the lethal vigilante stained glass Scarlet, Moon Knight is seriously injured and then falls into New York's East River from the top of the Brooklyn Bridge. After making impact with the water, Mark experiences visions of both Khonshu and his father, leading him to realize Khonshu is not limited to vengeance and is also a god of justice, offering people redemption just as he was offered the chance to be a hero after years of being a mercenary. Emerging from the water, Mark has already partially recovered from his knife wound. He believes he died from his injuries in the fall but that Khonshu resurrected him once again. Seeing himself now as a light in the darkness rather than simply a warrior, Mark shares his personal story with Scarlet, offering sympathy and redemption if she gives up her crusade and turns herself into the authorities. Believing she has failed God and is unworthy of redemption, Scarlet leaps to her death. 55. Moon Knight learns from Spider-Man that Jeff Wilde aka Midnight is alive, now operating as a cyborg warrior for the Secret Empire. Believing Wilde is not in his right mind and can be redeemed, Moon Knight tries to rescue him, fighting the Secret Empire alongside the heroes Spider-Man, Darkhawk, the Punisher, Nova and Night Thrasher. Encouraged by his nurse Lynn Church, whom he is now in love with, Wilde attempts a coup so he can lead the Secret Empire. During a final climactic battle, Wilde realizes that Lynn Church has been manipulating him and sees him as a weapon. Once again feeling betrayed by those he put faith in, Wilde destroys the Secret Empire's main base in New York City, equaling himself and Church in the process. Moon Knight once again mourns Wilde, regretting that he did not know how to reach the young man. 56. Moon Knight encounters Jason Missendale, Hobgoblin, while the mercenary is possessed by a demon, an entity later called the Mogul. During the encounter, the demon infects Moon Knight with a demonic parasite. 30. Unaware of the infection, Moon Knight continues his crime-fighting activities. He and the Punisher encounter the renegade branch of the cult of Khonshu again and its new leader Sandal Swarn, a former CIA operative who now calls herself Princess Nephthys, a former CIA operative and the lover of Randall Spector. Using mind control techniques she learned in the CIA, she was able to convince an imposter to assume Randall's identity as the Hatchet Man and fight Moon Knight, leading to the man's death. Assuming a leadership role in the cult of Khonshu following Plasma's death, Nephthys declares that Randall will be Khonshu's true Knight of Vengeance. Randall and Nephthys destroy Moon Knight's house in a bombing that leaves Frenchie paralyzed. Calling himself Shadow Knight, Randall undergoes experimental treatment by Nephthys that gives him superhuman resiliency to injury thanks to a shell over his skin. During their battle, Moon Knight sees an ancient scroll that seems to confirm Khonshu is dedicated to justice rather than vengeance. Moon Knight is able to crack Shadow Knight's shell with an adamantium weapon. Punisher executes Nephthys and later unleashes heavy gunfire on Shadow Knight, who suffers extensive internal injuries before then suffering a seemingly fatal fall. 33. Following the destruction of his home, Mark Spector sets up a new Shadow Group, lair in the lower west side of Manhattan, nearby Spector Corp headquarters. To advise him on his operations, his counsel, the Shadow Cabinet, needed the Shadow Group via holographic transmission and used codenames. The Shadow Cabinet includes tech expert Stash, businesswoman Penny Annie, low-level crime boss Don P, and psychologist Sigmund, who also acts as Mark's therapist. 57. Soon afterward, the demonic parasite in his body causes Mark's strength to steadily increase even as his health and physical form deteriorate. To compensate for his health problems, he exchanges his Kevlar Moon Knight armor for a new suit of lightweight adamantium armor right before he illegally enters the consulate of Latveria in order to confront the country's monarch Dr. Doom. 57. The Avengers, a team that relies on cooperation with the US government and the United Nations, learn Moon Knight gained help in invading the consulate by showing his credentials as an Avengers reservist and implying he was on an official mission. During the Infinity War event, Moon Knight fights an alien-created doppelganger called Moonshade who then absorbs the life force of different Moon Knights from parallel realities. This leads Moon Knight to meet a few of his multiversal counterparts, including the crime-fighting dynamic duo known as Moonman and Moonboy. 58. Following the Infinity War, Doctor Strange and Mr. Fantastic operate on Moon Knight and remove the parasite. 59. Moon Knight is warned it won't be certain until 48 hours have passed whether or not the damage done by the parasite is fatal. Mark Spector contemplates who could be the new Moon Knight if he dies. After deciding two candidates chosen by his Legacy Quest program are not suitable, Spector tries to recruit photojournalist Peter Parker, not realizing the young man is also Spider-Man. After Parker declines, Moon Knight gives up finding a successor. He is relieved when the 48-hour mark passes and his health remains stable. A side effect seems to be that his eyes now have a crescent moon mark over the irises, though this mutation vanishes in later stories. 60. Afterward, the Avengers confront Moon Knight about his abuse of his team reservist status to confront Dr. Doom. The hero decides to simply matters by resigning his membership and burning his Avengers ID card. 61. A technological villain called Seth the Immortal and his 0 Hour program threaten Moon Knight and all his allies. During a desperate battle, Moon Knight defeats Seth by blowing up his office with both of them inside, sacrificing himself in the process. Marlene is present and holds him as he dies. He is buried by his friends on the grounds of the estate he purchased with Stephen Grant. 62. Moon Knight Volume 3, Resurrection Wars, Moon Knight Volume 4, High Strangeness. Edit when the god Seth selects his own avatar to act on Earth and perform acts of destruction, Khonshu responds. Mark Spector wakes up in his grave and has a vision of being tasked with resuming his life as a champion of the moon. In the mansion of Stephen Grant, Marlene and Frenchie witness a statue of Khonshu seemingly explode, revealing a living and fully healed Mark Spector. Mark's latest resurrection, his third, and the fact that the Khonshu statue magically returns, fully repaired, finally convinces Marlene that Moon Knight does not suffer delusions and is in fact the chosen avatar of the moon god. For a time, Moon Knight decides to allow the world to continue believing Mark Spector is dead and chooses instead to focus on his other identities of Moon Knight, Stephen Grant, and Jake Lockley. Despite this, news surfaces that Mark Spector is alive, leading to assassination attempts. Moon Knight Volume 5 2006-2009, edit for reasons unexplained. Moon Knight abandons his belief that his role includes understanding his enemies and offering redemption and now acts with greater violence and brutality. Defeating Bushman after a vicious battle, Moon Knight goes further by carving off the villain's face. Spector is then haunted by Khonshu, who chooses a faceless Bushman as his representation. Frenchie reveals he is homosexual or bisexual and that he has been so loyal to Mark in part because he is in love with him, though he knows these feelings are not felt in return. The new secret committee hires the Profile, who has superhuman analytical skills, to help trap Moon Knight. After the plan fails, Profile becomes a reluctant confidant and source of information for Spector himself. Around this time, some heroes take notice that Moon Knight is now more violent and ruthless and attempt to speak to him about it. 63. Moon Knight discovers his would-be sidekick Midnight may still be alive. Moon Knight is later forced into a final confrontation. Midnight, no longer attempting reconciliation, Moon Knight seemingly kills him for good. 64. The new Superhero Registration Act, enforced by registered heroes such as Iron Man, requires superhumans and costumed champions to register as agents of the government agency SHIELD or be imprisoned. After prodding from Khonshu, Moon Knight reluctantly registers, not wanting authorities to interfere with his agenda. To be approved for registration requires a psychiatric exam. Believing Moon Knight to be mentally unstable and thinking he could become worse if he finds himself in conflict with the Registration Act or its enforcement, Tony Stark and the government have no intention of granting Mark Spector approval. The psychiatrist agrees and is about to make the decision official, even suggesting possible future imprisonment. Spector then seems to speak in the voice of Khonshu and points out the Doctor's own antisocial tendencies, as told to Moon Knight earlier by the Profile. The psychiatrist gives Moon Knight a pass on his exam and literally bows in deference to Khonshu. 37. Moon Knight shows little regard for his registration status or his registered colleagues. Carson Knowles, the Black Spectre, steals Stark nanotechnology and attempts to frame him for murder. Moon Knight later confronts Knowles and pushes him off a rooftop, apparently causing a fatal fall. Iron Man revokes Moon Knight's registration and buries the fact that Black Spectre stole his technology. 65. Rather than be imprisoned as an unregistered vigilante, Mark Spector gives up his role as Moon Knight but continues to fight crime clandestinely while wearing an entirely black costume. He considers that crime fighting is easier without the use of an alias or costume recognition. After realizing this change in methodology means he no longer has the insight and protection of Khonshu, he pleads for the moon god's forgiveness only to be told in a vision that he is no longer needed when Khonshu has other, more faithful followers. 66. Despite having seemingly retired from vigilante activities, Moon Knight is targeted by the Thunderbolts, former villains led by Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, who now act as enforcers of the Registration Act. To lure Moon Knight into resurfacing, the Thunderbolts arrange for the Wyos gang to attack Frenchie's restaurant, resulting in his lover Rob being injured. As hoped, Spector becomes Moon Knight again to avenge his friend. 67. Spector fights the villain Bullseye, an operative of the Thunderbolts at this time. Moon Knight lures the assassin into a warehouse where he then sets off explosives. 68. While Bullseye escapes, it is believed Moon Knight was killed, leading Iron Man to publicly denounce the Thunderbolts and its methods, blaming the group for the explosion. Jake Lockley, having now resurfaced and become the dominant personality, relocates to Mexico. 69. After hiding for a time, Lockley crosses paths with local Mexican criminal cartels and encounters the Punisher again, as well as an avatar of Colton. 70. In the U.S., the organization field is shut down and replaced by HAMMER, led by Norman Osborn. Concerned about Osborn now being in charge of enforcing, imprisoning, and controlling registered superheroes, Lockley decides to adopt the Moon Knight identity again and return to NYC. 70. Vengeance of the Moon Knight, 2009-2010, edit. Returning to New York, Lockley regrets Moon Knight's recent acts of ruthlessness. He tries to make amends to Marlene and Frenchie for his recent behavior. Determined Moon Knight must again be more heroic, he decides never to kill enemies or cause more injury than necessary in the future. Khonshu, now taking the form of a man in the Moon Knight costume with a bird skull, tests Lockley's resolve by repeatedly goading him to kill his foes. Moon Knight's efficient crime fighting and non-lethal tactics quickly gain favor with New York's population, angering Norman Osborn, who resents failing to capture and imprison the hero before. 71. Osborn hires the villains the Hood and Profile to take down Moon Knight. Using power borrowed from the demonic sorcerer Dormammu, the Hood resurrects Raoul Bushman. 72. Bushman and the villain Scarecrow break into Ravencroft Asylum where they perform brain surgery on several patients, then manipulate them into attacking New York City. After quelling the attack, Moon Knight subdues Bushman. Despite Khonshu demanding lethal vengeance, Moon Knight spares Bushman's life, satisfied the villain will be incarcerated. 73. Secret Avengers 2010-2012, edit. After ordering an attack on Asgard and having his corruption and insanity exposed, Norman Osborn is removed from power. In the wake of HAMMER being dissolved, the Registration Act is undone, meaning Moon Knight and other unregistered heroes are no longer fugitives. Steve Rogers, the original Captain America, recruits Moon Knight to the new team Secret Avengers. On one mission, Moon Knight adopts a simple white suit and mask rather than his usual body armor and hooded cape. 74. During the events of Shadowland, the hero Daredevil is possessed by the Beast, a demon worshipped by the ninja assassin clan known as the Hand. Moon Knight joins a group of heroes on an assault on Daredevil's Shadowland fortress. Daredevil almost kills Moon Knight, but Khonshu appears and asks Mark's life be spared. Daredevil is able to see the Moon God and concedes, leaving Moon Knight. Khonshu then reveals he needs Moon Knight to track down an artifact called the Sapphire Crescent. He must also fight and likely kill Randall Spector, who is still alive and operating as Shadow Knight again. 75. Moon Knight and Shadow Knight track down the Sapphire Crescent in New Orleans. During another battle, Randall threatens a hostage. Seeing no other choice, Moon Knight uses the Sapphire Crescent against his brother to save the hostage, killing Randall in the process. Jake Lockley suffers a mental breakdown as a result, going dormant as the original Mark Spector personality becomes dominant again. 76. Moon Knight Volume 6, 2011-12, edit Mark Spector relocates to Los Angeles and creates a TV show based on his own exploits called Legends of the Khonshu. Secretly, he continues fighting crime as Moon Knight. But now, along with existing as Mark Moon Knight, he also displays 3 new alters based on imitating the personalities of Spider-Man, Wolverine, and Steve Rogers. 77. Moon Knight teams up with the superhero Echo against Count Nefaria. 78. Nefaria strikes back and Echo is killed. This sends Moon Knight's Wolverine personality into a berserker rage, seemingly causing the deaths of Mark's alters based on Captain America and Spider-Man. 79. Moon Knight fights Nefaria and his daughter Madame Mask, then shows a new alter based on the personality of Echo, who asks that she not die in vain. After further battle, Moon Knight summons the Avengers for help and Nefaria is defeated. Iron Man commends Mark Spector. After he leaves, Spector seems to develop a new alter based on Iron Man's personality as well. In the epilogue to the series, Spector leaves Los Angeles. 80. Avengers vs. X-Men, 2012, edit during the events of the Avengers vs. X-Men storyline. Moon Knight is partnered with a small team of Avengers and battles some members of the X-Men team. At one point, Moon Knight grabs Rogue with his bare hand. Able to absorb the memories, powers, and life force of those she makes skin-to-skin contact with, Rogue experiences temporary madness as she absorbs the perspectives of Mark Spector's different personalities. 81. Later, Moon Knight is invited to Stark Tower to celebrate the return of Janet Van Dyne, who had been thought killed in battle years before. 82. Moon Knight Volume 7, 2014-2015, edit Spector returns to New York. His identity and past now a matter of public record, Mark regularly utilizes 2 versions of the Moon Knight identity. When engaging in battle with high-tech equipment, he dons a new Moon Knight body armor and sometimes uses shamanic tools of Khonshu such as an enchanted skull helmet. 83. When dealing with crime scene investigation and consulting openly with law enforcement, Spector dons only his mask and the white business suit he briefly wore during his time with the Secret Avengers, calling himself Mr. Knight. 84. Deciding he needs to manage his mental health better, Mark Spector meets with a psychologist who determines that he does not have dissociative identity disorder, as some have hypothesized in the past, or some form of schizophrenia. In truth, he has a form of brain damage due to his brain being physically altered by Khonshu, who is a real entity from another world or dimension and altered Mark in order to create a conduit between them. Mark's different personalities are a result of his mind adjusting to the 4 different aspects of Khonshu's nature and aspects. It is why he sometimes has 4 alters existing simultaneously but never more. Moon Knight encounters another renegade cult of Khonshu, though this cell targets the homeless and other marginalized people, making them new cult members as well, or using them as human sacrifices. Moon Knight Volume 8, 2016-2017, edit Mark Spector wakes up in a mental institute with no recollection of his past or how he got there. The staff, led by Dr. Emmett, seems to have supernatural powers and thwart Mark's attempts to recover his past. Mark is shown evidence that he is a mentally ill man who has convinced himself he is also Moon Knight, a vigilante he's seen on the news. Khonshu contacts Mark and explains that Emmett is an avatar like him, one who is connected to the othervoid god Ammon. Khonshu decides it is now time for him to completely dominate Mark Spector's body. Mark denies Khonshu and fights him with the help of all of his alters. Mark accepts that whether they are the result of childhood trauma or Khonshu's interference, his alters are a part of him and have been for most of his life. After defeating Emmett and Khonshu, Mark resumes his life as Moon Knight, determined to be a protector and crime fighter on his own terms rather than as a tool of anyone else. Later, Mark and Khonshu resume their bond. 85. Crazy runs in the family. 2018 edit. After reappropriating Khonshu, Mark Spector resumes his normal life and his Moon Knight activities. Raoul Bushman collaborates with a mysterious mental patient only referred to as Patient 86. He becomes an avatar of Ra and calling himself the Sun King. Together they come up with a plot to kill Moon Knight. 86. To accomplish their plan, Bushman and Sun King go to Marlene's house and discover she and Jack Lockley had a child together, a revelation that shocks Mark Spector and Steve Grant. 87. Raoul and Sun King then kidnap Marlene and lure Moon Knight to an island base. With Khonshu's guidance, Moon Knight is able to overpower Sun King, although Bushman escapes. 88. The Age of Khonshu. Edit. Deciding to take over Earth in order to protect it, Khonshu compels Moon Knight to acquire power for him. With enhanced abilities and insight, and convinced that Khonshu's plan is the only way to protect Earth from the demon lord Mephisto and others, Moon Knight takes the power of Iron Fist, Ghost Rider's Hellfire, Thor's Hammer Mjolnir, and some of Doctor Strange's magic. With this and more, Khonshu begins to reshape Earth. During a battle with the Black Panther, Moon Knight temporarily becomes a host for the Cosmic Phoenix Force. But rather than allow the Phoenix power to cleanse the Earth by wiping out humanity, Moon Knight releases the power even while the Avengers defeat Khonshu. The Asgardians imprison Khonshu and Moon Knight is allowed to return to his activities. The Black Panther offers him membership in the Avengers again, but he refuses, preferring to focus on battles he understands and angry at Khonshu's extreme actions. 89. Moon Knight Volume 9, 2021, edit. Despite believing that Khonshu is a god unworthy of his worship, Mark Spector still considers himself to be spiritually connected to the deity, and decides to continue acting not only as a knight of the moon god but also as a priest of his teachings. He creates the Midnight Mission, a religious congregation following the teachings of Khonshu. As its high priest, Mark adopts his Mr. Knight suit and mask as his official religious vestments. Living at the Midnight Mission, he offers aid to listen to anyone who visits and needs his help. As Moon Knight, Spector frees several people who were kidnapped by vampires and unwillingly made into vampires themselves. 90. Rather than condemn them, he offers them sympathy. One of the new vampires, a woman named Reese, takes a job as Mark's assistant at the Midnight Mission. He crosses paths with Dr. Botter, Hunter's Moon, who proclaims himself to be the second fist of Khonshu and believes that Moon Knight's path must be corrected, after straying from Khonshu's methods of vengeance. 91. After defeating Hunter's Moon in combat, Moon Knight confronts enemies sent after him by the villain Zodiac, leading to a direct confrontation between the two. 92. During the Devil's Reign storyline, Mayor Wilson Fisk passes the law that outlaws superheroes. Moon Knight is the first to be apprehended where he is tackled by Thunderbolt's members Agnes, Electro 2, Rhino, and U.S. Agent. 93. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more videos about your favorite comics, movies are coming soon. Please join me on Patreon by Omaranger004. Your small donation helps run the channel. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so